The following is a GoPowercat.com production.
Welcome to the Insiders. Week number, I don't know. It's just all blurring together. 4 or 5. It's Fitz, the guys from GoPowercat, and our special media guest today is Scott McFarland from the Boscoe's Boys. Scott, how long you been doing that sucker?
Oh, man. Our very first episode, and I'll give a shout out to Grant, who's been suspended and brought back different Twitter accounts a million times. Our very first episode, believe it or not, was previewing Bruce Weber taking down the Kentucky Wildcats. And then we had a show where we were talking on some old app that has been discontinued for our second episode, booking our flights to Atlanta for a game that is only slightly less annoying than the one that we all just witnessed in Provo. So,
So well, good to have you.
6 years.
Yeah, 2018. I remember it well for another reason. And we got off to a rocky start, didn't we? But we're good now. I even met Grant this weekend. Put my arm around his shoulder. He didn't kill me.
No, of course not. And it just kind of goes to say, as time moves on, a lot of us mature. Luckily for me, it happened before I turned 30. So hopefully I've buried any old hatchets already, and never thought I'd be on this show. I recall listening to, downloading on my iPod Classic before YouTube was really even a thing. You, Marcus Watts, I can't. Oh,
Riley.
Man, you've had a million folks on throughout all these years, but it is as the tagline when it's on Apple Podcasts, the original K-State show, and that it is. And it's surreal to be here, and getting to share this show with you and three other more handsome gentlemen. But you're the headliner, so I'm pumped to be here, and I appreciate you asking. I'm glad it finally worked out timing wise.
Well, let's get into it, boys. That was not pretty. Scott and Gills and I saw it in person. Cole and Big B held down the fort because they had to do the post-game show. That had to be a fun task. Big B, did you have to moderate yourself at all from what you were going to say on that post-game podcast?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, yeah. I mean, we kind of talked a little bit before the show, before we went live, and just kind of tame myself. It was just, I don't know. Look, there's a lot of things that we could have said. Some people have gotten on me, said I was too hard on them. I don't think I was hard enough, to be honest with you. There's a lot more that could have been said, and maybe we'll say that today, but we got to press forward because we got to get better.
Exactly. Cole, how'd that show go? Of course, Gills and I were preparing to fly, almost made $4,000, and then ended up not making any, but getting home because Delta offered us a buyout and then pulled it back. It's not fair. The world's not fair. But Cole, what were your thoughts going into that post-game podcast?
Well, I'm very happy that, first of all, we didn't have to do it at 2 a.m. That would have been cruel and unusual punishment. Had the score for K-State been switched and they would have won 38-9, I would have loved to do the podcast at 2 a.m., but I was ready to go to bed as soon as that game ended. As a matter of fact, I think I actually submitted my story when there was still some seconds left on the clock. I don't tell the boss that. But nonetheless, the post-game podcast was interesting. And I was honestly surprised at the amount of fans that were still in tuned and so dialed in. I think that just goes to show that this fan base is, first of all in on this football team. And I didn't see as much frustration as I might have expected. And I don't know if that's because it was such a lopsided loss, or if that's because everybody kind of saw the same game. And there was a few plays that you never see from not just this K-State game, but from K-State team, but from a football team in general that really ultimately decided the outcome. I think it's fair to say that you can put all the blame, and you should put all the blame on the world for K-State for refusing to get up off the canvas. But they were officially knocked down on the canvas on some, I think everybody can agree on, plays that you don't normally see. And I think that's kind of what everybody in the chat room, everybody I talked to, and I think Brian and Wally and I agreed upon was like, yes, blame needs to be placed on K-State wholeheartedly. But there is something to be said for how the game transpired.
Yeah, it was frustrating. Scott, how was your experience? You're the only one of us in the stands, out in the fresh air. Beautiful night in Provo, beautiful setting. and quite the spectacle of a production they put on for football. But how was your experience?
Yeah, game aside, 99.9% BYU fans were awesome. There was one who took exception to me pointing out that the BYU dance team was out there for one of the field goals. And I don't understand why he got so worked up out of me hollering about that, but beautiful setting. I would say, of all the legacy Big 12 road, or I guess the 10, not the original Big 12, I've gone to every away stadium. I think the atmosphere there is better than just about everyone I've ever been to. I think that their in-game production was awesome. And when we were up 6-0, I was thinking to myself, all right, should be 14, but we're rolling. I'm getting to take in this great show, great atmosphere, and we're going to come away with a win. But when it started to snowball, it snowballed fast. And, I'm not going to hide from it. When I saw them turn the corner on that punt return, which I thought we were going to, recover, be inside the red zone, they turned the corner. I looked to my buddies and said, I've had enough. I plugged in my earbuds. I listened to Wide and Stan on the Varsity app as I was getting back to the Airbnb, but I had enough. I could not, my skin was crawling. I couldn't handle being in the stadium after that. So I didn't even see the fourth quarter light show.
Oh, that was a smart move. I wish I could have done that. And Scott just stole my second question, so he doesn't get to answer this one. Ryan Gilbert, what was the play that you said, this is done. This is done?
Oh, man. I would say Avery's first pick coming out of that, or after halftime. So not his first pick of the game, but after halftime, because you're down 17-6. You can just forget about everything that had happened in the last couple of minutes in that first half. But Fitz, really, that pick to come out of the locker room, K-State had a chance to make it a one-possession game. And I know Kleiman mentioned in his press conference on Monday that he wanted his team, his defense, after Johnson's first pick, to go out and hold BYU to a field goal. I get that. Make it 13-6. You can go tie the game with a touchdown, but still, 17-6, 13-6, really not that much of a difference. Get it to a one-possession game with a score after halftime. And once Avery threw that pick, I was like, yeah, we're in for a long night. I didn't expect plays like that punt to happen, but obviously it did. And Fitz, I think you are just trying to rub it in my face. Right when that third quarter had ended, I went to the bathroom up in the press box, and I caught the very end on my way back to my seat of Cosmo is his name, right? Cosmo doing the flip with the weighted, all that stuff. But I think you're just trying to make me feel bad that I missed that. I don't even know if you caught that I wasn't there for it, but I didn't get it.
I don't even notice when you're there. So.
Yeah, right. So, oh
well. Cole, what do you think? What was the play that you said broke the back?
Well, I'm typically someone who watches a football game, and I look at it from the perspective of, okay, you have the eye test, you have the statistics. And I thought in the first half, both the eye test and the statistics showed that K-State was a better team. Really, the only statistic that didn't show that was the score. And
turnovers,
yeah. And so, I mean, it's 17-6 at halftime. And even when Avery Johnson throws that interception, I'm like, all right, I think K-State can still win this game, even if they give up a touchdown. Now, is it improbable? For sure. But when it was 24-6, I'm like, okay, well, K-State has to be perfect from here on out. Now, were they perfect in driving down and getting into the red zone? I believe at that time they had only punted. They hadn't punted at all. They had turned the ball over twice, and they had finished with 2 field goals and gotten in first and goal in both of those. And so, you're thinking like, okay, well, all they have to do is break through that wall, and they get a score. Then it's 24-13. They get a stop. They get the ball back with a chance to go make it a one-score game. And by the fourth quarter, it could be a one-score game. So when it was 24-6, I was not ready to say that the game was over. And maybe that's just me being the former player and being the coach of like, hey, this is still a football game.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's from that perspective. But really up until that punt return, I was like, this is going to be a football game. And even on the punt, first of all, can we talk about Simon McClanahan for a second? I know Kleiman mentioned it, but that ball got up in the air. And like it just kept going. Like that was an amazing punt, and he can be a real weapon for this team if he continues to kick like that. But when that happened, it's just like what are you gonna do? I mean, there's literally nothing. It's like in baseball. I make baseball analogies all the time, but it's like in baseball when a guy goes to rob a home run and it hits his glove and goes over the fence. That's literally what it felt like. And so when that happened, it was like, yeah, there's probably no coming back from this.
How about you, Big B?
I'm with Gills. Coming out of halftime, you can try to change the momentum immediately. You get the football, you're like, okay, let's go down. Let's get something. I thought we had to get a touchdown. I thought that's the reason that we were behind anyways, because we kept kicking field goals. But you come down and you throw an interception and then they score immediately. When they scored immediately after that, I'm like, yeah, this one's over. We can't recover. We haven't figured out how to stop this momentum. And nothing changed. It's just, and that was my thing. I was just like, coming out of halftime, look, if we're so conservative and we're running the football, I'm like, well, then why don't you get back to running the football and being successful with it? But it's almost like, okay, we're behind. No, we got to throw it. We got to throw it. And I'm like, I don't know that was the play. And then the interception, and then we didn't stop them. I'm like, this one's over. We're cooked.
I'm with you, Scott. When I saw that opportunity to recover a muff punt slip away and that guy hit the edge, I'm like, this is bad. This is over. I mean, they have every bit of momentum, and K-State can't seem to wrestle it away no matter what happens. They just have the mojo right now. I'm with you. I wish I'd had headsets so I wouldn't have to hear Gills after that, but I didn't. I thought Chris Kleiman said something really interesting today, and it stuck with me historically. He was upset that his defense, so we had the scoop and score. You saw that happen. They take the lead, and then the interception happens, and he's thinking, okay, my boys are going to stop. This defense is going to stop them, and they didn't. And that was really what upset him. Scott, I agree, because that's the lynch mob, the mob mentality. We're going to take it into our own hands. We're going to take care of this. And the defense did exactly the opposite. And Scott, I found that incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, they had a chance to bail out the offense. I do find that is something that Chris Kleiman does in games like this. I don't know if it is to take heat off of a quarterback who's feeling it, because if you go back to the Oklahoma State game, I believe one of his comments, I don't know if it was post-game or if it was his then Tuesday media availability last year, he said that the issue was that the defense didn't get turnovers in that game. And look, the defense could have bailed out the offense 100%. And I think he's a defensive-minded coach, but it does feel like he has the tendency to say, hey, look, I'm going to try to take a little bit of heat off of that quarterback that may be feeling it from the outside. Last year, Will Howard, this year, Avery Johnson, with the first real stinker that he's had. So that's my takeaway from it. Could the defense have done more? 100%. But I feel like that is his old reliable after games like that, to maybe help spread the blame around and try to, keep everyone moving in the same direction. So there isn't a defense versus offense, whether it's in the locker room or amongst the fans trying to point fingers. So it's true. They could have bailed him out. But my takeaway is still, hey, when you turn the ball over 3 times on offense, I mean, what can the defense really do when you're giving up that short of a
one
field?
of them was a scoop and score too.
Yeah. Well, that's a 1 in 1,000. It just bounced right away from where all K-State's players were.
But that's the thing. People are saying that, but it's not like that never happens in a football game. That happens in football games. Now, we haven't seen it a whole lot, but that doesn't mean it's 1 in a million that this is just a fluke thing that happens. It isn't. That happens in football. But my thing is, you just got to bounce back and get up. And we just stood there and got punched in the face and didn't even put our hands up. And that was what was frustrating for me, Fitz, is that we saw them punching us and we stood there and just got punched and did nothing. That's the frustrating part for me.
And guys, too, I think, you bring up Kleiman's comments. Well, let's not forget Kleiman is a defensive coach.
Yep, there you go.
And so everything he sees is going to be from the defense's lenses. I totally understand that. Well, dang it, the offense sucks, but as a defensive guy, we've got to be able to overcome that. And so that's kind of his viewpoint on things, for better or for worse. And you know what?
I think he's right.
Yeah, I mean, he is right. And you come into this game, and if you were to tell me that BYU, what were they? Were they 100% in the red zone scoring touchdowns in this game? I believe they were.
Did they got the red zone on their field goal, didn't they? Then they backed up. Didn't they have a
They
sack?
backed up.
There was the sack.
Yeah.
So held them to 1 field goal. Guys, I'm sorry, but like this defense has been bend but don't break for however long Joe Kleinerman has been around. So, I mean, yeah, you have to have better red zone defense and you have to force more field goals. Like, if K-State forces more field goals instead of touchdowns, I'm not Captain Obvious here. This is a football game at the end, even with the turnovers.
Right.
And so, I kind of subscribe to the mentality that if the opponent can do it, then so can you. And especially when that's what this defense is predicated on, not giving up big plays, bending but don't break. And they just simply, I think you're right, Brian, like they got punched in the mouth. And I don't think, quite honestly, the defense was expecting the explosive plays that BYU had in the red zone. I think they took for granted the fact that they were able to stop the run and they didn't respect the quarterback at BYU. And Retzlaff kind of took advantage of them. And quite frankly, I wasn't expecting to see that because he had been horrible last year and has completely changed his game this year. So give credit to where credit is due. But yeah, I think that I don't want to say the defense was a little surprised. Were they put in bad spots? 100%. Could they have been better, like Kleiman says? No doubt.
Ron Gilbert, I was sitting there next to you in the press box, really confused by what I was watching and how fast it unraveled. But I think in hindsight, the thing that shocks me the most is there wasn't a response. Whether it was offense, defense, or special teams, there was no response to that flurry. They just continued to struggle along. And I think that was the part that really, it angered me. I expected them to rise up and be pretty mad, but they almost went to acceptance in the third quarter. Well, we're going to lose. And I don't accept that either.
Problem with Avery Johnson was he was trying to hit the home run and get right back into the game. And K-State's offense this year really hasn't been, I know there's been some big plays, but you got to go 1st and 10, 2nd and 7, 3rd and 3 and pick up a first down. That's kind of the way that you can get back into a game like that when it's 17-6 out of the half, when it's 24-6 after that turnover. And I think Avery Johnson was just trying to do it all in one play. That was probably his biggest issue, forcing things. I know the first interception, right, was more of a screen pass. That was, not a fluke play, but the second one was definitely just on Avery, I think, trying to do too much, right? Real quick, K-Ned, though, K-Ned points out in the comments here that if we're, like Scott and Big B were debating, right, that fumble, okay, if you want to call that a fluke or a 1 in a million play, K-State didn't deserve to beat Tulane. Because that's ultimately what got the Wildcats over the hump in New Orleans was a scoop and score. So it's got to go both ways here.
It doesn't. They're
You don't
different
think so?
plays.
I agree with you.
A quarterback strip is common in the game of football. DJ Giddens fumbling is unheard of, let alone it becoming a scoop and score.
Yeah.
They're not the same play, K-Ned. And the rarity of DJ Giddens fumbling, I don't even know if he has, at least a lot lost a fumble. And having that just bounce that way right to him, it was astonishing. Now, look, scoop and scores are kind of rare, but stripping a quarterback is a pretty common part of the game. And in fact, you could tell Austin Romaine aimed to strip the quarterback, and DJ just got hit in the exact right spot. So no, I don't equate the two, but I do give credit to BYU. They made a huge freaking play that completely changed the game. And credit to BYU. They continued to make plays throughout that game. And K-State got penalized a lot. Sometimes it was good calls. There was a holding that was kind of bizarre. But at the end of the day, Scott, K-State shot themselves in the foot. They go into the red zone. Hey, let's have a penalty. Let's be consistently awful in the red zone. K-Ned did say earlier, they need to come up with an attitude like the defense has to recover. K-Ned said we got a 5-yard penalty. That's no big deal. We can overcome that because it looked like it broke their spirits.
Well, not only that, I think on both of the plays, there's the false start that would have been an easy touchdown. There's the holding while, Connor Riley, I think on that second field goal drive, he was in his bag. I thought it was maybe the best drive he's called as K-State offensive coordinator up until that holding penalty. And I do wonder, I don't want to say, okay, they're not mentally tough. I don't know. I'm not in that locker room. I'm behind a microphone. I was a bad varsity, football player on a bad, team. So I don't know what it's like to perform at that level, but it seems like, they had that one play. They didn't have it in them to say, okay, doesn't matter. We're going to go get it. And I do think in the red zone, I would have liked to. I know this is something that you're on board with as well. Once you get to the red zone, if you're not going to run Avery Johnson the entire field, that's fine. But look at what Skylar Thompson did in the red zone.
Yeah.
Look at even Will Howard. I think, I think his running maybe got overrated by some folks up in Columbus, Ohio. But look what he was able to do in the red zone down there. When it becomes a numbers game, when you lose the amount of field you get later on, having that be a threat with how electric his legs are. The biggest play we had was a designed run for him. I almost feel like, all right, if they're going to be conservative with his legs in the other 80 yards of the field, so be it. But once you get down there, especially if you're shooting yourself in the foot, you cannot hold anything left in the bag when it's time to make your money.
Well, and the power running game works. It gets a little more difficult in compressed situations because the safeties are up a lot closer. But I just felt like they were a little bit disjointed every time they were in the red zone, starting with the penalties. And, a couple of those false starts were on Sam Hecht, and he's playing his first real game in a real road environment. He played at Tulane, but no one's going to count that as a real environment. And you could tell the noise was affecting him. And he was like flinching right before he snapped the ball. That happens, and often it's not called, but these officials were on it. It's the right call, but sometimes it's ignored. It was a comedy of errors and mistakes and things that didn't go right. And do we have anyone else that has a final thought on this game? Because I would like to move on, like Chris Kleiman said at the press conference today.
So I was just going to say that, Fitz, like this is one of the only games that I can remember in the last 4 or 5 years that I've been covering this team where it's like, I'm sorry, like this is just disgusting. I wasn't there. I have no association with the football program, but like this is just one of those games where like, oh, like I feel dirty talking about it. Like I feel like I need to go take a shower to wash off like the stench of that game because it's just over. And like I just could see, and I felt bad for all of you who were at the press conference today because it is our job to ask the questions about the game. But it was extremely apparent that Chris Kleiman wanted to talk about Oklahoma State, and I, for one, cannot blame him.
Yeah, Big B, look, one final thing, though. Is this a game you just say, that was a mess, let's move on? Or are there some really valuable lessons in what happened there, and you need to study that? Because that's the way I feel.
No, there's definitely lessons. I mean, you can move on, but you got to understand, you got to take your medicine. I mean, that should have been a horrendous film study with each individual position coach and let them have it and then find out where the fight was. That's the whole thing. You can talk about the mistakes and, the mental mistakes and being rattled and all of that stuff, but where's the fight to fight back? That's where you got to figure out what's going on here. I think that's the biggest problem for me. And I've said it several different times. Look, the play calling, we can be mad about that. Not getting people involved, we can be mad about that. All of that stuff is legitimate. Don't get me wrong. But you're not going to win many football games if you're not going to fight through adversity. And this was the first test of adversity, and they laid down. So, no, Fitz, I'm with you. Like, you got to figure this out and look at this tape and say what went wrong and then go from there. Clearly you need to move on because the season doesn't stop. But at the same time, you got to learn your lessons because if you're not going to learn and figure out how to fight back from adversity, it's a problem because this is not the only time that this is going to happen this season.
Two things we now know. Chris Kleiman has never gone 4-0 at K-State, starting with 4 wins. But when they lose one of these games, like in 2022, they just turn around and go win at Oklahoma. They lose to Tulane and Manhattan, win at Oklahoma. But he had an interesting answer today. He said that was that team. This is this team. So I think, Scott, he's a little aware of that. He's unsure how his team will respond to that performance. And he's, hoping that he can pull them together and let them understand that game doesn't matter now. We got to learn from it, but let's take this fight to Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and luckily you're at home. It's probably not going to have, the juice of what we all were thinking maybe, 72 hours ago, thinking that it might. But I think getting in front of that home crowd and maybe letting them, get out there, perform, put on a show, hopefully that'll get back. But he said it last year. He's saying it this year. It isn't the 2022 team. I think we all want it to be. We wanted it to be last year. I'm hoping it turns out similar this year, but I'm glad he's saying it like that. And I feel like Chris Kleiman, when he's speaking to the media, I think he's really also trying to get a message across to those guys saying, hey, look, you're going to hear it. Hey, Chris Kleiman teams bounce back, but it's not Chris Kleiman teams. It's the 2024 K-State football team. You can't rest on the laurels from other folks. So those first two drives for both the offense and defense are going to say a lot. I'd imagine by 11:45 a.m., we're either going to feel a lot better about this team, or folks are going to be on StubHub trying to sell tickets for the rest of the year because it could get ugly.
If it does get ugly, Scott, text me and let me know where you're drinking in the parking lot.
Well, it will be Manhattan Brewing Company beer that I bought from the fridge. So
that's perfect. We've got both sponsors in there. That's beautiful. Big B, you just got to move on. And K-State gets to reload 11 a.m. They don't have to mess around on Saturday. They're going to get back to their groove. This is a good morning team typically at home. We'll see if they do. But I want to point out this to everyone. 2 years ago, K-State dismantled Oklahoma State 45-0. It was a worse loss than what K-State just suffered. Again, another game in which everything went to the home team. Everything in that game, and Oklahoma State fell apart. And then they turned around and beat K-State last year. So one doesn't have to lead into the other. I mean, this is a brand new game, brand new team, and boy, you better get ready because this team isn't good enough to be a 2-loss team to get into the playoff without winning the Big 12. And if you lose your first 2 games in the Big 12, you're probably not winning the Big 12.
No. And here's the thing is that Oklahoma State's going to come in looking to fight back too. So that's the thing that excites me about this football game for Kansas State, because you're going to be facing a team that you thought that Kansas State got whipped. Oklahoma State physically got beat up for 3.5 quarters of their football game, just physically beat up. So much so that their coach basically threw a Hail Mary at halftime and benched his quarterback. That's how bad it got for Oklahoma State. So they're going to be coming in looking to fight too. And that's why I'm excited. Scott's right. We're going to find out pretty quickly how tough our football team is. And that excites me because I really believe that they are. I believe they have that fight in them. It just sometimes you get around kids and when it snowballs, it just goes south. And I don't want to say it's a fluke because I don't believe that it was a fluke. I don't believe any of that talk. However, I do believe that sometimes you just can't stop momentum. And BYU is probably a little better than what everybody thought. And maybe K-State's maybe not quite as good as everybody thought. But that doesn't mean we still don't have a really good football team. It doesn't mean that at all. And I just like the sense of we're going to play against somebody that literally just got beat up by a bully and is looking for somebody else to beat up. Well, you know what? Don't come here thinking you're going to beat us up to get your get back. It doesn't work that way. I like that kind of attitude, and hopefully the guys have that.
And 2 guys, like something to think about. I mean, Gilbert, you talk about this all the time, but like the bounce back spot. Like in the NFL, that's a real thing. When you look at teams, hey, they had a really bad game. Well, this is a perfect opportunity for a bounce back game. Chris Kleiman and Mike Gundy are in very similar situations here, but had K-State found a way to win that game in Provo, honestly, guys, I actually might be more nervous because Oklahoma State comes into Manhattan then with absolutely nothing to lose, right? They come in with nothing to lose. Now, I mean, both of these teams, for a better lack of a phrase, have a lot to lose. I mean, if either one of these teams lose, there's a good chance that you're not making the Big 12 if you do win out your games, which I'm not so sure that either one of these teams, will win out if they lose this game. But then you probably aren't making the Big 12 championship game. So, I think that this is a really good spot for K-State because they have a chance to get back, to get right. And they have a chance to do so, guys, in a matchup that I really like for this team, simply because I still believe the strong suit of this Kansas State team is its defense. And Ollie Gordon and that Oklahoma State running game, it is a sleeping giant. I do believe that. But they are completely different. And Chris Kleiman talked about it in his press conference. Guys, if you don't let Ollie Gordon beat you, that means the guy that they just benched has to. And that's going to be the strategy for K-State. And I think it's going to be the strategy for teams across the Big 12 moving forward.
You're listening and watching to the Big 12. Nope. I did it again, Big B. The K-State Insiders. Jeez. From GoPowercat.com. The GoPowercat staff gathers every Monday night and has a guest media person in, although Scott doesn't call himself the media. But he's a very talented podcaster. So he is our guest this week, and I have a great deal of respect for Scott and the Boneheads, great K-Staters. You still call them the Boneheads?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
I love that nickname.
They're the best. They're the best.
So, and plus they drink beer. So you got to respect that all the time. Hey, this keeps popping up from different people. Let's bring this up before we really fully move on to Oklahoma State. Where's everyone on the use of Dylan Edwards? They've got to find ways to put him on the field. They very rarely put the two on the field, Giddens and him together in this game. I didn't understand it. It was effective in the Arizona game. I know BYU is a different team and defending differently. But again, more weapons stress the defense more ways. And when one of those weapons is on the bench, it's just less stress and it frustrates me. Whoops.
I mean, I'll go first.
Yep.
I said it on the post game the other day, and I'll say it again today. Everybody criticized Coach Prime for not using Dylan Edwards and him leaving. I mean, we're not using him either. 7 touches is not near enough. You said it, Fitz. More weapons puts more stress on a defense. Well, teams don't go, you know what? Let's have just as little of weapons that we can possibly have on offense. You know, we only want 1 or 2 weapons on offense and then go and try to figure things out. That's you've never heard anybody ever say that before. You want as many as possible because you put them on the field and then teams don't know what to do. They don't know what to take away because you can't take away everything. Well, K-State is doing that on their own. They're literally taking away weapons. I don't understand it. I don't know what we're waiting on. There's got to be ways to be able to put this man on the field and get him the ball or just to even be a decoy or something. But I do know that 7 touches is not enough. I don't care what anybody says. 7 touches is not enough for him. Not nearly enough.
Totally
not
agree
the
with
way our
you.
wide receivers play. So, no,
Well,
not near enough.
You pointed it out exactly. He made, well, I think it was only 1 catch, but he looked, I mean, it was right to the sideline. He had to make a good play on the ball. He brought it in. If nothing else, putting him in as a slot or just having him screaming across the formation and jet, and even turning it into a modern triple option where you have to account for 2 of the fastest guys in college football and then a bruiser and DJ Giddens, who again, DJ, despite that fumble, he was just knocking on the door of 100 yards again. You don't want to take him off on the field. You need these 3 guys, these 3 Kansans to be able to put stress on every defense from here on out. Because quite frankly, I don't believe there are enough skill guys on the outside to warrant Dylan Edwards not getting, at least, between 7 to 12 touches plus all the stuff in the kicking game. Plus, like you said, being a decoy, just running and causing havoc. There's not enough talent on the outside to keep him on the sideline and just see, the wide receivers trot around out there. You have to get him out there.
And 2 guys, I actually think we're going to see that. And I know I said it last week, but I do think we're going to see it more this week simply because of a personnel issue. I mean, no Braden Lofton now. And so maybe instead of going 2 tight ends as much as they like to do with Lofton and Swanson, I do wonder is Oakley and Swanson as effective as Lofton and Swanson, or as Oakley and Lofton, right? So like we've seen 12 personnel with 2 different tight ends. Now you're really realistically, you had 3 tight ends. Now you're realistic. I can't speak. Words are hard. You have 2. And so I think that maybe changes some packages a little bit. I would like to see Dylan on the field more. Again, guys, like Scott, you talked about the triple option. I have been hammering home that same concept. And when they ran it at BYU, I tweeted out the GIF of Leonardo DiCaprio from standing up and like pointing at his TV. Yes, that's kind of how I felt. It doesn't even have to be that all the time. Like, find ways to be creative. I mean, like, go watch the Chiefs. And I know I always bring up the Chiefs whenever I talk about K-State, but like, it's because they have one of the most genius offensive minds in the history of the game of football. If you're willing to let Patrick Mahomes shuffle out and go in motion and be a wide receiver and snap the ball to freaking Carson Steele, I mean, like, there's a way to get Dylan Edwards the ball and get downhill immediately. If that's in the Wildcat, so be it. But could you imagine? I mean, I would absolutely love to see some form of a Wildcat with Dylan Edwards and DJ Giddens running the read option out of that, because that would just be tremendous to watch.
By the way, I think Carson Steele should actually change his name to freaking Carson Steele. That's perfect as it describes his game. Ryan Gilbert, give me your assessment of these receivers. I thought it was going to be better, and here we are.
Yeah, real quick with Dylan Edwards. I've been thinking about saying this or not saying it, but I don't want this to come across as me trying to stir the pot or this being a hot take. But I know Ryan Wallace has talked about it, about Trey Spivey, for example. He can't be happy at wideout with his usage. Dylan Edwards, there's no way he's happy with the lack of touches he's getting. You know, Dylan Edwards knows that there's a lot of programs out there that would love to have him be their guy for 15 touches a game. And so you have to keep these players happy, keep them in check. Easiest way to do that, of course, is getting them their touches. So I'm not saying Dylan Edwards is going to transfer, but it might start to enter his mind if he's not getting what he desires in terms of usage. But yeah, the wideouts, I mean, Big B, you called it right before the season, man. A lot of expectations, a lot of high hopes, and year after year here with Kleiman, that's probably his Achilles heel as a coach, is the wideouts just continuously underperform. And that's not a knock on those guys up near the top. You know, Jace Brown's been fine. Keegan Johnson, I think, had a real good early start against BYU. But, you know, Jaden Jackson, where's he been? We've outlined the struggles a lot with Dante Cephas. You know, even guys like Sterling Lockett, not to take a shot at him or anything. You know, he hasn't been bad, but I thought we were kind of expecting more from those depth guys at the wideout spot. And against BYU, it was nothing different.
Well, I mean, in to Sterling's defense, he hasn't had many opportunities, and when he did it Tulane, his quarterback missed him. That'll be tomorrow's daily delivery, by the way. I've been saving that topic. But as we headed into the show, I had no clue what my daily delivery was because, Gills, does it surprise you? I forgot. So thanks for reminding me of that. Here's what I want from K-State. Dylan Edwards is play him against Oklahoma State a lot in the backfield with DJ, without DJ, with 3. If you've got the option built in there somewhere, which they ran it once, it was a really long pitch from Avery. That was perfect. Surprisingly, that was a tough play. Run it, man. Just open it up a little bit. You cannot lose this game. You can't. It's at home, and this is really your most significant challenge left on the schedule that I see. So you got to win this one. But they go into the off week, and during that off week, I want Dylan Edwards in the slot. I want Dylan Edwards playing at receiver a little bit. Don't try to teach him the playbook. Teach him 3, 4, 5 plays. He is a faster Phillip Brooks. You put him in motion and hand him the ball, he's trouble. He's going to be around that edge before you know what happened. You've got to find more ways, and I think the only way to do that with the presence of a running back like DJ Giddens, who, let's be honest, you don't want to take him off the field that often. I get it. He's a workhorse. You got to get him on the field, though, and whether it's with DJ or without DJ, they're going to have to get creative. And at the bottom line, Scott McFarland, can we get creative on the offensive side of the ball? Period. Just open this thing up and get creative. If you're saving crap, don't. Use it, win games. Do things better than the defense can stop. And Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards both do that. They do things that just can't be stopped because of their athletic ability. Put them in positions to do so.
Yeah. Can they do it? Yes, because I feel like probably 3 or 4 plays a game, we see something, and I'm just nudging whoever I'm watching the game with, or in the case of Tulane, hollering at my dog. Oh, did you see that? Oh, look at that play. You mentioned that speed option. Again, you see it, you're thinking, oh boy, and then you see that ball go out there 2 or 3 yards down the field, and you pick up another 10. I think they can do that. That quarterback run that, again, if Avery maybe slows down, lets Taylor Portier get out there and get a body on that safety, maybe that's a touchdown. You've seen the flashes of the creativity. I think it can get there. I don't know if it's holding stuff back. I don't know if it's, hey, we only have 4 or 5 of these. And it's not even trick plays. It's not. It's just like, hey, it's playing Madden, having fun out there. I don't know how many they put in every week, but we've seen glimpses of it. And I think that if you're going to send a statement, I think you need to. I think you have to have more than just 4 or 5 of these really fun plays that seem to always work versus Oklahoma, or in general, you have to have them versus Oklahoma State because, like you said, you're going into a bye week. And if, God forbid, things don't go our way on Saturday, I can't imagine what the next 10, 12 days would be before they start getting ready to go to Colorado. And that's not a place you want to be going if anyone's heads aren't truly in the game, because it's going to be a show. It's going to be a circus there. And then with everything with the Dylan Edwards stuff surrounding, I know him and Dion, they get along great. Him and Shedeur get along great. But there's going to be so many stories. There's going to be so many distractions. You have to be locked in. And having a good performance, having a creative performance versus Oklahoma State is going to go so far in getting ready for that.
Guys, Fitz, I want to point out that context is everything. I wish I could go back, and I might still do this, and clip where you said Dylan Edwards is a faster Phillip Brooks. Those were words that came out of your mouth comparing to I just think that's hilarious. Context matters, everyone. But guys, how much better? I mean, think about this. Okay, if we would have had a crystal ball at the beginning of the year and said K-State will be 4-1 heading into a bye, I had K-State at 11-1, and I'm not ready to change my prediction. But if they had said K-State 4-1 going into the bye, I don't think that, quite honestly, would be unreasonable. If you expect them to compete for the Big 12 championship, I think that's very reasonable. I mean, tough games. Like, say what we want to say. I don't think anybody was predicting a loss at BYU, but there was plenty of folks who at the end of this year or this past season were predicting Arizona to beat K-State. Like, that was a very common prediction. And so I don't think very many people would have said, oh, horrible at a 4-1 start. But that all hinges on K-State winning on Saturday. If they can win on Saturday, you kind of can take a deep breath, take a step back and say, we got the bad game out of the system. Now it's time to look ahead, and all the goals that this team wants to do are still in front of them. So I'm not ready to hit the panic button. I'm really
not. I don't think anybody should hit the panic button. I think you're 100% right, Cole, in talking about 4-1. People would be okay with that. Maybe not okay, but they could at least, okay, you know what? The season's not a wrap. But you just mentioned context matters. And it's the way that K-State lost is the problem.
It'll be a problem.
It's not that they lost the game. It's the way they lost the game,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So if context, and obviously it does matter. I mean, if we lose at BYU and it's 35-34 and whatever happened, okay, people could get past that. And I'm not saying people won't get past it, and nobody ever accepts losing, but at least you could understand. And that's where the difference comes in. So the context has to matter here too, is that while we still have to win this game, I don't think people should be talking like this is just a guaranteed, hey, we're just going to roll in and just whip Oklahoma State. I don't think we need to talk like that. Having said that, I think it's a game that K-State can absolutely win and should win. But I think that's where the feeling of people are frustrated, because it's like, man, well, are we that good? Because the way we played, it doesn't seem that we're not as good as what everybody thinks. And this game will go a long way into letting everybody know. That's why, Scott, I 100% agree with you when you said early on, the first 2 drives on offense and defense, we're going to know a lot about our football team. We absolutely will. I believe that wholeheartedly.
Well, in college football, go ahead, Ryan.
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was going to say, in college football, even the best teams have absolute stinkers. Georgia got out by the skin of their teeth playing a field goal game with Mark Stoops over at Kentucky, has 1 foot in retirement. You know, if they can have that sort of a stinker, and again, different levels, I understand that. I'm not comparing K-State to Georgia, but you can have these bad games in college football. It's still 18 to 24-year-olds, or, you know, in BYU's case, 18 to 32-year-olds playing a game, and stuff happens. But as I said earlier, as you repeated, if they don't come out with that fire, if they don't come out with their hair on fire versus a team that's also, it's do or die for both these teams.
Absolutely.
And if you can't have that hype, and I'm not saying it has to be 14-0 and you're getting the ball back, but if you don't play with that passion, that's when all of a sudden it's you have to look at BYU. You play with the passion, you have that fire, you get that win. You don't completely ignore the BYU game, but you can at least go into the bye game and say, hey, that was college football, not a actual, systematic problem with this year's team.
Yep.
Agreed. Gills?
I was going to add, I mean, Big B, you mentioned the loss, the way that K-State lost was obviously, a loss is a loss, but the way that it happened was kind of disheartening. But guys, I would be much more concerned if I was an Oklahoma State fan. Obviously, K-State had some, you look at the penalties, the pre-snap penalties, stuff like that. There were some stuff that, I think, in the last touchdown for BYU, that 21-yard run, there was like 4 or 5 missed tackles. I get it.
By then.
But yeah, exactly. But a lot of the stuff was fixable. The turnovers and stuff like that, hate to call it a fluke, but a lot of that's fixable. Oklahoma State just got straight up dominated against Utah. 4 of 15 on third downs. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, especially with Utah riding with a backup quarterback. If I'm an Oklahoma State fan, I am really hitting the panic button because you went up and had a golden opportunity to steal one against probably the best team in the league, not having its best player, and you go and crap the bed. Now, obviously, that final score is rather deceiving. Oklahoma State was getting manhandled for the first, 50-some minutes of that game and made it close at the end, sure, but that's got to be worrisome because there is a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed and corrected. Whereas Kansas State, okay, DJ Giddens doesn't have that fumble. Okay, if that punt actually was muffed and K-State recovers it, right? A play here and there, and that's genuinely a different result in Provo. Oklahoma State, though, it was just dominated.
Yeah, they were. I'm sitting here thinking maybe Utah fans were right. They're going to run the Big 12 because they were physical. They're going to run into other physical teams, but I think Oklahoma State was caught off guard by how physical. And once they started, like tug of war, once you start losing the rope, going the wrong direction, you're losing the battle. And that's what it looked like to me. I still think the best game in this conference would be Kansas State and Utah, but after Saturday, I think K-State's got a lot to prove to itself, let alone the fans in the Big 12 and the voters that are going to be in charge of picking the playoff. If they would get to the Big 12 championship and lose and be 11-2, you better hope BYU is really good this year so it doesn't look ugly on your resume.
Yeah.
Because they're looking for reasons not to invite ACC and Big 12 teams.
100%.
This is loaded up for the SEC and Big 10 to cash in. And I'll let you argue the SEC is better. I will. I'm not going to let you argue that from top to bottom, the Big 10 is better because there's so much trash in that conference.
Mm-hmm.
It's just pathetic that they get paid that amount of money to suck, to be tackling dummies for the rest of the conference.
Well, you guys saw try to prop up Nebraska, and we saw what happened to them. I just don't want to hear it. And me and you, Fitz, we've been singing those praises about them being top heavy ever since I started working with you, man. It's absolutely insane. And you're right. K-State's got to do something. We got to continue because you're 1,000,000% right. They are looking for reasons not to invite Big 12 and ACC teams. So, but I do think that BYU is a little bit better than what we thought. Yep. Maybe this was a fluke game. I'm not going to buy into that, but I don't know. Maybe it was. Maybe they do beat some teams down the road. Their schedule is actually pretty difficult. If you take a look at their schedule, it's pretty difficult. So we'll see how good they really are.
Guys, can I'm going to say this, and I'm not trying to take a shot at anyone, but I'm trying to take a shot at someone. I sometimes listen to the radio, which I don't know why I do. There's so much good K-State content out there by amazing creators like Scott and everyone else. But sometimes you get in the car and you turn on the radio and you just so happen to listen to something so preposterous that, it just catches your ear. And I was listening to a local radio station today by someone who did not attend the University of Kansas or Kansas State. And they were trying to talk about college football, which, by the way, if you're wanting to listen to about college football in general, go check out the Big 12 Insiders and everything else that we do over here. But like the opinion was that Avery Johnson is not good enough to go on the road and win a night game. And I don't think I have ever disagreed with something more. And like that was all that was said about K-State. It was literally just a little 30-second. K-State, you got a quarterback who might be good, but he's not good enough to go on the road and win in a night game. And that to me was just spoken like someone who has never watched a single down of Kansas State football and maybe focuses more so on the SEC network in Missouri than anyone else. Scott, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, and here's the thing: that's anyone who's a Missouri fan who's trying to look down on K-State or even KU.
Yeah.
Again, you're in down to the wire with Boston College. You need a Vanderbilt kicker who's more concerned about his econ paper than kicking the ball to bail you out and win that game. Give me a break. And look, I live right here in the Kansas City Metro. I'm addicted to podcasts, sports talk radio, all of it. There isn't anyone worth listening to if they're talking about college sports by themselves. There's some great folks who go on Kansas City radio. I hear Tim Fitzgerald on in Kansas City radio, on a semi-frequent basis. There are, Stan Weber goes on. We hear Wyatt Thompson. Yep. If guests are on, cool. But if it's just the two guys, they don't care. It's a Chiefs town. It's fine. Don't look for that because they have no clue about anything with college football. But sadly, the point you made, there's national college football podcasts who are going to say that stuff about Avery.
Yep,
they talk about how he can't pass. He's just a running quarterback, all that type of stuff. They look at stat lines. They see some highlights. Look, he should not worry about what these other people are saying. He needs to stay within his own game. The coaches need to stay within their own minds. Don't listen to outside noise. But that's going to be the narrative until he puts up a 300-yard game. It doesn't bother me. I watch the games. But that, sadly, is going to be the narrative, or until he wins the Big 12 title, that first Saturday in December, putting up big numbers versus Utah. That's what's going to happen. And it's going to take one of those big games for that narrative to stop for right, wrong, or indifferent.
Right. One night road game into his entire career, and he can't do it.
People forget what he did versus Texas Tech.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, wasn't he kind of responsible at Texas Tech last year? I don't know.
Ridiculous.
Well, I think the Colorado game is going to, first of all, that will 100% be a 7:00 game on Fox or a 6:30 kick on Fox because of
baseball playoffs. It might not be.
Oh, that's also a good point. I guess we'll have to watch the Royals. Scott, you might have to meet me at the Peanut there, brother. But I think that K-State Colorado will be in prime time. And if you've watched Colorado at Big V, as we've talked about before, that defense, they made Baylor look good last week. So I'm excited for that.
We've had K-Ned with a super chat here. If you want to make sure your question is responded to on the podcast, hit that, was it $? I never do it. It's down there. Click it, and here you go. You get a pretty color too, and then the whole world knows how much you gave us. It's so probably give us like 50. Anyhow, K-Ned wants to know, Big B, are the Cats allergic to the middle of the field, and why? And he's exactly right. They haven't used the middle of the field until the fourth quarter on Saturday. Saturday night, it's like, hey, it's after midnight at home. Let's go down the middle. I mean, it was crazy, and it worked. And I feel like BYU is saying, hey, take the middle of the field. We know you're not going to do it. And they didn't do it.
I mean, it's been that way. We've said it year after year after year. And even with Ben Sinnott, it wasn't really over the middle stuff. It was more seam type of stuff with Ben Sinnott. It's just like, and I said it the other day, I'm like, when's the last time you've seen a Kansas State receiver run a dig route? Or when's the last time you've seen a Kansas State receiver run a shallow cross? Like, I literally don't remember the last time I've seen that. And it's almost like you're telling me that Dylan Edwards on a shallow cross can't make a guy or two miss and see what can happen. I'm just like, come on. If we can think of this stuff. Now, granted, I played football, but I'm no offensive wizard or anything like that. I don't spend my days devising up football plays. It's not what I do. I go, but these guys do. They got to know that kind of stuff. So at some point, the conservative type of stuff, and we just got to get out of our own way with it and just say, you know what, give the guy the ball in space, use the middle of the field. We don't always have to be in 12 personnel. Cole, you brought this up. I'm like, is that the best formation for us? Because I don't know that it is, especially if you have all these weapons that we talk about having. 12 personnel is not going to be the best formation for us. Now, is it good to run the football? Yes, it is good to run the football. Are we successful? Yes, but that just because you're successful doesn't mean that's the best for you. And I think sometimes people get caught up in that. I just think we got to do more. We got to do more. But yeah, I mean, I said it the other day on the post game. I think we're allergic to the middle of the field, and it's not just this team. You can go back for however long you want to go back. Just don't use it.
Has K-State run a tight end or running back up the post yet this season? I mean, they used it again. It's in the playbook still. Connor Riley used it at the bowl game, and it worked to perfection. And yet they haven't gone to it. Look, I am not as worried about Connor Riley as everyone else. I know he's got a really good football mind. I think he gets his sequencing out of, I thought the end of the first half was a train wreck. Open it up, run the 2-minute drill. Great time to practice the 2-minute drill and go down the field. And Chris Kleiman explained, they just wanted to get a run. They wanted to set a tone with a longer run, and they didn't, and ended up at a fumble. But then they came back, instead of just kind of running out the clock, said, screw this. We just gave up a scoop and score. Then they open it up, and it ends in disaster. I think that the sequencing gets out of whack. I think he knows how to call plays. And I think he's out thinking himself in some ways about what plays to call. I want to save this. I want to save that. No, win the damn game. Just do it. If you have to put it all out there, put it all out there, and then sneak some new things in for every team. I don't know. I'm grumpy, but I know this. No matter what Oklahoma State's stats say, Scott McFarland, you got to stop Ollie Gordon first. He is going to erupt at some point this season. I don't think he's been the same running back. I don't think his confidence is there. But once he starts to taste it, he's going to go to the buffet line and have a feast on someone. And that could be K-State on Saturday.
I haven't looked at his game logs from last year, but I feel like he wasn't the Ollie Gordon who was a borderline Heisman Trophy contender early in that season. That is what's making me a little uneasy when you start looking at this. I believe he got to, I think he was splitting time early on, and then Oklahoma State said, all right, you're going to take us to Arlington, and that he did. So I'm a little worried that it could be that explosion. Now, I like what the K-State defense has done versus, running attacks. I think that they have a shot to neutralize him, even if he does start feeling himself. But man, that is a running back that can single-handedly win a game. And I don't want to be on the other side when he does break out and have his first 300-yard rushing game this season, because it's going to come.
I mean, and if you go back and look, and somebody pointed this out to me on the Big 12 Insiders, you go back, he really hadn't had a good game since that UCF game last year. And it's almost like that was the secret sauce. And ever since that game where he did absolutely nothing, now you could say Bowman threw a bunch of picks. He did, but 12 carries, 25 yards. I mean, they gave it to him 12 times, and he still only had 25 yards. Ever since that game, he hadn't done much. It's almost like people have figured out, and they said, okay, Bowman, you beat us. We know how to stop this. Now you beat us. And against lesser competition this year, that's worked. Against some good competition, it absolutely did not. So, and I would consider K-State really good competition. They still got to go out and do it. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's a secret sauce out there that teams may have figured out how to stop this running game at Oklahoma State.
Guys, listen to this. This is crazy. I knew it had been bad, but I mean, Arkansas, a game that which they trailed a lot. And I think you can kind of attribute Arkansas' success to shutting down the running game. 17 carries for 49 yards. That's 2.9 average. They end up winning that game in double overtime. Against Tulsa, they win 45-10, but he went 17 for 41 for a 2.4 yard per carry average. And then against Utah, he's 11 for 42 for a 3.8 yard average. He hasn't broken 50 yards in 3 straight games.
Right.
So-
and 22 of those yards, Cole, were on the last 2 carries when Utah was playing prevent defense.
Yeah.
Remember that too.
Yeah, it's
so
true.
I mean,
It's crazy. It's
I don't
weird,
know.
guys. And I think, again, it goes back to what we were talking about in the show. Do you think that Alan Bowman can beat you?
No.
If the answer to that question is no, then you put 6 or 7 guys in the box and you play zero coverage. You say, Jacob Parrish, Keenan Garber, Marquise Siegel, we trust you. And we believe that if they try and throw the ball, our defensive line can get to the quarterback. If they try and run the ball, they will not have success. And if you don't believe that Alan Bowman can beat you, you have to stop the running game. And it's worked for Arkansas. It worked for Tulsa. Now, granted, their DBs obviously weren't very successful, but it definitely worked for Utah because they even got Garrett Ringel in there. And so, I don't know, guys. I'm really excited for this game. I think K-State has an outstanding shot to win.
Gills, are they going to bounce back? K-State?
Yeah, I mean, Chris Kleiman hasn't lost back-to-back games since 2021, I believe was the last time. And so, yeah, I mean, he's proven that he can get his guys back locked in and focused. You guys are talking about Ollie Gordon, though. Yes, make Alan Bowman beat you. I wholeheartedly agree. But at the same time, K-State's giving up less than 85 yards a game on the ground. And so it's not like you have to sell out and just and just stop the run. K-State already has a real good run defense, so it doesn't have to be that much of an emphasis. Really have to make Alan Bowman beat you, though.
This has been the K-State Insiders from GoPowercat.com. Scott McFarland, thank you very much for being our guest. What day of the week does the Bosco's boys drop?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Why are you so lazy?
Yeah, I know. And that's with juggling a secret day job. But I did want to take this time to just say to anyone listening live or watching it back, it's never been a better time to be a K-Stater who enjoys consuming K-State content. There are multiple great websites, GoPowercat being one of them, GoPowercat being around longer than any of them. I know people like to give Kellis a little bit of trouble, but Kellis does a great job. There's a few good beat writers in traditional newspaper journalism. There's some of us fans who are trying to do this podcasting thing and having fun putting podcasts out there. There's independent YouTubers doing their thing. John Kurtz, what he's done on YouTube after leaving radio has been amazing. What Mitch Fortner does every day in Manhattan radio has been amazing. So again, while you might be in Kansas City, you might like to hear some stuff on some of the sports talk radio. You might want to read stuff in the national media. It's never been a better time to be a K-Stater who, consumes content. So I want to thank you for bringing me on and, thank you for being the original K-State podcast. And, if you eventually stop producing episodes, maybe one day we'll hit, 3,000 episodes and catch you, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that one.
You'll eventually catch us, I promise. Big B hosts the Big 12 Insiders every weekday also, another hardworking fella. Tomorrow, he and I will do the power rankings, the always popular power rankings. Everyone does them, but ours are the best. Let's just be honest, Big B. That'll drop tomorrow afternoon. And of course, the spotlight game of the Big 12 Insiders this week is Oklahoma State and Kansas State. And Brian Gilbert, you will be appearing with our friend McLean Baxley from the Oklahoma State site on that episode on Wednesday. Scott's right. It's a great time to be a Wildcat. I know the disappointing loss stung. I get it. But get back on that horse and hang on, because this still could be a wild ride. This is a young quarterback, a new offensive coordinator. They're learning, and I think they're going to get a lot better. And we appreciate you watching so very much.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.